When I walked through the front door, the silence hit me like a brick wall. No balloons. No welcome home banner stretched across the living room. Just my mom, barely looking up from her phone, giving me the same indifferent look she'd give a stranger trying to sell something at the door. And my dad, he looked at me like I was some stranger asking to crash on his couch. "You made it," my mom said flatly, without even pausing her scroll through Facebook. I knew she was probably reading something about my sister Harper's engagement. That's when it hit me, nothing had changed. To them, I was still the screw-up. The one who quit the Navy and vanished overseas, trying to find myself. Or whatever story they'd made up to explain why I disappeared. I glanced around. My old bedroom was gone. It had been turned into Harper's wedding planning headquarters. There were boxes of white tulle and gold ribbon stacked where my dresser used to sit. I ended up sleeping in the garage that night, the walls so thin I could hear them gushing over Harper's fiancé. A real officer, my mom kept repeating. Army intelligence. Not like. Well, not like me. The next weekend, everything came to a head at Harper's engagement party. The entire extended family came together to celebrate. Harper looked like a vision in her crisp navy dress whites. She was everything my parents had always wanted, perfect. Polished, the golden child. I was standing by the catering table in my civilian clothes, a gray slacks and a simple blouse, feeling like a ghost among the sea of uniforms and military wives. Dad's old Navy buddies, Harper's fellow officers, distant relatives, everyone was there, and they all knew the story. Harper was the success, following in Dad's footsteps with honor. And me? I was the cautionary tale. The one who couldn't hack it. The one who ran away when things got tough. I reached for a glass of water, trying to fade into the background, when suddenly, the entire room went still. Conversations died. Heads turned toward the entrance. A man in full military dress had walked in. Mid-40s. Broad shoulders. His chest full of ribbons that caught the light. He was late, but when he stepped into that room, his presence demanded immediate respect, and then my heart stopped. I knew that face. Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Ramirez. The last time I saw him, we were crawling through sewage tunnels in northern Iraq, dodging sniper fire during a classified extraction. 7 years ago. A war that never officially happened. His eyes scanned the room, calculating, assessing. His gaze found mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. It was like the air itself held its breath. Then, in front of my entire family, in front of everyone who'd ever dismissed me, he snapped to attention and saluted me. "Ma'am." "SEAL Commander," the words hit the room like a grenade. Harper's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. My mom's phone dropped beside it. Dad's face went through a series of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and something I swear was recognition. I didn't move. Didn't confirm or deny. I just gave the slightest nod, the kind you give an old colleague at the grocery store. No fanfare. No dramatics. Just the truth, hanging in the air like smoke. Ramirez lowered his salute and sat down as if nothing had just detonated in the middle of a suburban engagement party. That night, alone in the garage, I stared at the ceiling, the walls of my carefully constructed double life beginning to crack. For 15 years, I'd lived as a ghost. My real service record had been buried so deep that even I wondered if it had all been some elaborate dream. But it wasn't a dream. At 18, when everyone expected me to accept my Naval Academy appointment, I was recruited into something else entirely, something that didn't exist on paper. Something that left no room for family photos or newspaper clippings. I was part of a female SEAL team, operating under zero identity protocols. Our names were scrubbed. Our records sealed. Our existence classified at levels higher than most black ops. We were shadows. Ghosts. Our lives only became real when the mission required it. For over a decade, I served in places that don't even appear on maps. Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever America needed someone who could disappear when the job was done. But there was a price. No medals. No recognition. No parades, we were expendable. Not because our lives didn't matter, but because our deaths couldn't be acknowledged, and I had made peace with that bargain. What I hadn't expected was how it would feel to be invisible to my own family. To watch them celebrate Harper's success while treating me like a failure. 3 days after the engagement party, my encrypted phone buzzed with a notification I hadn't seen in years. Someone had accessed the files for Operation Storm Hatch, classified records of one of my most dangerous missions. The breach triggered an automatic notification to anyone with operational ties to the mission. My heart skipped when I saw the source. The IP address traced back to Harper's base computer. I knew I had to confront her. I found her in her apartment that night, still in uniform, research papers scattered across the kitchen table. She was writing her thesis on women in special operations, trying to uncover the stories of female warriors who'd been forgotten by history. She had no idea what she'd just stumbled into. I sat down across from her, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "Harper," I began, my voice quieter than I meant. "Did you access classified files?" She looked up, eyes wide and startled. "I didn't know they were classified, I swear. I was just researching. I found this folder, but I didn't even get to read most of it before the system locked me out." I don't know what happened, I believed her. That was the problem. Harper had always been the curious one. Too curious. She wanted to prove herself in a world that still questioned whether women belonged in combat. But her innocent research had triggered something much worse than she realized. Someone was using her breach as justification to bury Storm Hatch permanently. And in the process, they planned to erase every trace of what we had accomplished and what we had sacrificed, the mission that changed everything. It all began in 2011. 6 women inserted into northern Syria to dismantle a terrorist financing network. This network was bankrolling attacks across 3 continents. Officially, the mission didn't exist. Unofficially, it was the most successful counterterrorism operation of the decade. We went in expecting a 48-hour extraction, but we ended up staying for 12 days. We held a bombed-out schoolhouse against impossible odds while tracking financial transfers through sandstorms and drone surveillance. When local police betrayed us and handed one of our teammates over to militia commanders, we broke every rule to get her back. We succeeded. We dismantled the network, captured the financial records, and extracted with no American casualties, but it was messy, complicated, and politically inconvenient. The kind of success powerful people preferred to forget. Now, someone was using Harper's breach as a reason to paint Storm Hatch as a failure, a cautionary tale about what happens when women are put into combat roles beyond their capabilities. I couldn't let that happen. Not to my team, not to Harper, and not to the truth. I was sitting in my apartment, trying to figure out what to do next, when I received the call. The Pentagon had scheduled a hearing in front of a congressional oversight committee. Harper was suspended pending investigation. Her career hung by a thread because of a simple mistake, her accidental discovery of files she was never supposed to see. But I had something they didn't expect, the truth. Documented. Undeniable. I knew what I had to do. The hearing was set. It was in the heart of Washington, D.C. I walked into the room wearing my full dress uniform for the first time in 15 years. The committee members shuffled their papers, clearly expecting to rubber stamp another bureaucratic cover-up. They had no idea what was about to hit them. I took my seat, my heart pounding in my chest. I had been silent for so long. I'd kept my secret for over a decade. But now, it was time to tell the real story. I stood and testified for 3 hours. I spoke about Storm Hatch, about the mission that officially never happened but was the most successful counterterrorism operation of its time. I didn't tell them the sanitized version in the official reports. No. I told them the real story, the split-second decisions, the moral complexities, the lives saved, and the sacrifices made. I showed them the video footage from my helmet camera, the communications logs, the after-action reports. Everything I had to prove that we did our job, and we did it well. But the most powerful moment came when Harper took the stand, my little sister, the one who'd always been in the shadow of military expectations, stood up. She defended not just me, but every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't good enough, that she wasn't strong enough, that she wasn't worthy of the uniform. She didn't disappear because she failed, Harper said, her voice clear and strong. She disappeared because her success was too inconvenient to acknowledge. The room went silent. I had never been prouder of her than in that moment. The decision was unanimous. Storm Hatch would be declassified. It would be added to the official record of successful special operations. My service record was restored. My rank was recognized. For the first time in 15 years, I existed again in the eyes of the military I had served, but the real victory came later. It came at the family dinner table. It was a simple family dinner. Dad had fired up the grill, and Mom had made her famous potato salad. Harper set the table for 4, a sign of how much had changed. It was a normal night, well, as normal as it could be, considering everything that had just happened. There was no awkward silence, no sideways glances, no whispered conversations behind closed doors. "Tell us about Syria," Dad said quietly, cutting into his steak. "If you can." The weight of his words hung in the air. I looked around the table. I saw the faces of the people I had spent my entire adult life protecting from a distance. They were ready to listen now, ready to understand that sometimes the greatest service happens in the shadows. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones that never make the headlines. So I told them about Syria. I didn't go into every gruesome detail. Some things still needed to stay buried. But I told them enough to help them understand. I told them about the mission, the choices we had to make in split seconds, the lives saved, the lives lost. I spoke of the risks we took, the lengths we went to in order to get our teammate back from the militia, the people we had saved and the ways we'd fought to protect them. I talked about the quiet nights, huddled in the ruins of that schoolhouse, listening to the sounds of distant gunfire and wondering if we'd make it out alive. And yet, despite everything, we succeeded. We did what we came there to do. No medals. No recognition. Just the knowledge that we had made a difference. My family listened. Really listened. I could see the change in their eyes. They weren't just hearing about it, they were understanding it. They were starting to see me. Not the daughter who quit the Navy. Not the disappointment, but the woman who had fought in the shadows. The woman who had sacrificed everything for her country. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. For the first time, I felt seen. We ate in relative silence after that. Not the uncomfortable kind of silence, but the kind that comes from finally understanding each other. Dad asked a few more questions, but they weren't the usual probing questions about why I left the Navy or why I hadn't come back sooner. They were questions about the mission. About the people I served with. About the sacrifices we made and how we survived, and I answered them. I could feel my shoulders relax as I spoke. For so long, I had felt like an outsider in my own family. Like I was still the little girl who had disappointed them. But now, in this moment, I was part of something bigger. I was part of the conversation, and it felt good. Later that evening, as we cleaned up the kitchen together, I thought about everything that had happened in the past few months. The engagement party. The hearing. The restoration of my record. And now, this, finally coming home to a family that was ready to hear my truth. It wasn't perfect. I wasn't expecting everything to change overnight. But I had taken the first step. And I had brought them with me. That was all I could ask for. The next morning, I woke up early. I was the first one up, so I made coffee for everyone. As the aroma filled the kitchen, I felt the weight of the years begin to lift. I thought about the future, my future, and what it would look like now that my truth was out. I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing: I had finally found my place. It wasn't in the Navy. It wasn't in the accolades or the recognition. It was here, with my family. It was in the moments where we could finally be honest with each other. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And that's what mattered. The phone buzzed on the counter, interrupting my thoughts. I picked it up, and the name that appeared on the screen made my heart skip. "Colonel Ramirez," I said, a grin creeping onto my face. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and serious. "I wanted to let you know that I've received word. Storm Hatch is officially declassified. Your team's efforts will be acknowledged in the next operational report. They'll be putting out a statement." I nodded, feeling a surge of relief and pride wash over me. "Thank you, Colonel. That means a lot." "I'm proud of you," he added. "You did what needed to be done. You always do," and for the first time in a long time I felt like I had. I had done my duty. I had served in a way that would never be written in history books, but that didn't matter. It was enough that I knew what we had done. What I had done, and now, finally, my family did too. 6 months later, I found myself standing at a podium, facing a crowd of young officers, men and women who were just starting their military careers. I was invited to speak at a military leadership conference, and the weight of the responsibility hit me hard. These were the people who would lead the next generation. They would take on the same challenges I had faced. The same obstacles, the same uncertainties. And I had a chance to help them understand something crucial. The room was filled with eager faces. Their eyes were full of hope, determination, and a little bit of fear, the same look I'd had when I first stepped into the world of special operations. "Some of you will serve in ways that earn you medals and recognition," I began, my voice steady as I addressed the audience. "Others will serve in shadows, doing work that can never be acknowledged. Both kinds of service matter. Both require courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to something larger than yourself." I paused, feeling the weight of those words settle in the room. I thought back to all the missions I'd carried out, to the moments where I was pushed to the brink, to the times when I felt like I was invisible. My service wasn't for a plaque or a medal. It was for something deeper, something more significant than any external recognition could provide. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I could feel them processing it, feeling the truth in my message. "I know what it feels like to be invisible," I continued, my voice softening. "To give everything and have no one notice. To fight in a war that no one ever hears about. But here's what I wish someone had told me when I was your age: your worth isn't measured by the recognition you receive. It's measured by the lives you touch, the missions you complete, and the integrity you maintain when no one is watching." There was a shift in the room. I could feel it, the understanding, the connection. These were young officers who had their own battles ahead of them. But I hoped my words gave them something to hold on to when the going got tough. I wanted them to know that their service was meaningful, whether the world acknowledged it or not. After my speech, I stayed for a little while, talking with the attendees. Most of them were eager to ask questions about leadership, about the military, about my experiences. But one woman stood out. She was young, probably in her mid-20s. With a determined look on her face that reminded me of my younger self. "Ma'am," she said, stepping forward. "I'm hoping to apply for special operations training. Do you have any advice?" I looked at her for a moment, seeing the same fire I once had. It felt like a lifetime ago when I was in her shoes, struggling to prove myself. But here she was, standing in front of me, ready to take the next step. "Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do," I said, smiling. "And don't mistake silence for failure. Sometimes the most important victories are the ones no one sees coming." She nodded, understanding, passing between us like a torch being passed from one generation to the next. There was a sense of responsibility in that moment, a sense that I was helping to shape the future of military service. Helping this young woman understand that her worth wasn't determined by others' expectations. I left the conference that day feeling lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For years, I had struggled with the feeling that I wasn't enough. That the work I did, the sacrifices I made, would never matter. But in that room, with those young officers, I knew that my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to them too. The truth of what I had lived through, the work I had done in the shadows, was now a part of something bigger. It wasn't about medals or recognition. It was about the people I had touched, the people who would carry that knowledge forward. That was the true victory. It wasn't just in the military that I was fighting for recognition. It was in my own life. In my family. In my relationships. I'd spent so much time hiding in the shadows, hiding from the truth, that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to step into the light, but now, things were different. I had come home to a family that understood me, at least, in part. I had earned the respect of my peers, the acknowledgement I had long been denied. And while it wasn't always easy, I had finally found peace with myself. There was still more to do. More battles to fight. More shadows to step out of. But I was ready. For the first time in years, I was ready. I thought back to that night in the garage. When everything had felt impossible. When I had felt like I was fighting a battle no one would ever understand. And I smiled. Because now, people were starting to understand. And I knew that, even in the silence, my service mattered. That was enough. A few months passed, and life began to feel like it was moving in the right direction. I was still navigating my new place in the world, trying to figure out where I fit now that the truth was out. The Pentagon had declassified Operation Storm Hatch, and I had finally received the recognition I'd longed for, but it felt different than I expected. The applause, the awards, the acknowledgement, none of it felt like the victory I had imagined. The real victory came quietly. It came in the moments when I realized that I no longer had to hide. That I could step into the light and simply be. It came when I started having real conversations with my family. Conversations that weren't clouded by judgment or misunderstanding. That afternoon, I sat down with my parents. We were in the living room, just the three of us, no distractions, no noise. Harper was out of town, and it felt like the right time to really talk. Dad sat in his armchair, the same place he always sat. He looked at me differently now. Not with disappointment, not with confusion. There was something else in his eyes. Respect. Understanding. I had waited for this moment for so long. And now that it was here, I didn't know exactly what to say, so, Dad started, his voice a little rough. Tell us about the missions you've been on. All the ones you couldn't talk about before. I took a deep breath. I could feel the weight of everything, the years of silence, the hidden pain, the sacrifices that had never been acknowledged. But now, I was ready. Ready to share the real stories. I'd been on a lot of missions, I began slowly. Some that people will never know about. But there were a few that changed everything. As I spoke, I saw my parents' expressions soften. They were listening. They were really listening. For the first time, they weren't just hearing the words, they were hearing the meaning behind them. They weren't seeing me as the daughter who ran away. They were seeing me as the woman who had fought for something greater than herself. When I finished speaking, there was a silence that lingered in the room. It wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't filled with awkwardness. It was the kind of silence that comes when everything has been said that needed to be said. Finally, Dad spoke. You did good work. And I'm proud of you. We're proud of you. Mom nodded, her eyes glistening. I never understood what you went through, but I understand now. And I'm sorry. For everything I didn't know. It was a simple apology, but it meant more to me than any grand gesture or words of praise ever could. It was the acknowledgement I had needed, and in that moment, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't the recognition from the military or the medals or the accolades. It was the peace that came with being seen, really seen, by the people who mattered most. Weeks passed, and I kept working on myself, on rebuilding the connections that had once been broken. I didn't expect everything to be perfect, and it wasn't. But it was real. And that's what mattered. I also spent a lot of time reflecting on the lessons I had learned during my time in the military. There was so much I had taken for granted. I had always focused on the external validation, the need for recognition. But now, I understood that the real measure of service, of sacrifice, is in the quiet moments. It's in the times when no one is watching, when the work goes unnoticed. It's in knowing that you did your part, that you did your duty, regardless of whether anyone ever acknowledges it. Then, one day, I got another call. This time, it was from Colonel Ramirez. "I've got something for you," he said, his voice warm but serious. "We're putting together a new project. Something that's going to require your experience, your expertise. It's classified, but we want you on the team." I smiled, feeling a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about medals. It wasn't about being recognized by the world. It was about continuing to serve, continuing to fight for what I believed in, even if no one ever knew my name. A few weeks later, I found myself in a small, secure room in the heart of the Pentagon. I was part of a team now, an elite group tasked with handling a mission so sensitive that no one would ever know about it. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that I was back where I belonged. Not in the shadows, not as a ghost, but in the fight, and this time I wasn't alone. As I sat at the briefing table, surrounded by people who understood the weight of the work we were doing, I realized something important. This was what I had been searching for all along. The chance to make a difference. The chance to serve. To do what I was meant to do. I had come home, not just to my family, but to myself. And that was the real victory. If you've ever felt like your hard work goes unnoticed, or that your struggles are invisible, remember this: the most important battles are often the ones no one sees. The victories that matter aren't always the ones that make the headlines, but they are just as real, and sometimes, the greatest service you can offer isn't in the spotlight. It's in the shadows, fighting for what's right, doing your duty, and knowing that you're making a difference, even if no one ever knows your name. As my story demonstrates, sometimes the biggest victories come in silence. The most important achievements aren't always celebrated, and the greatest efforts can often be overlooked. But it's in those quiet moments, when no one is watching, when there are no awards or accolades given, that we truly see our worth. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or forgotten, know that you're not alone. My story is just one example among many of people who have given so much without ever receiving the recognition they deserve. But what I've learned is that what matters most isn't the recognition from others, it's knowing that what you do has real value, even if no one else sees it. One of the most profound lessons I've learned from my journey is that true dedication has nothing to do with external validation. Everyone in our lives, whether at work, in our families, or in situations where we feel disregarded, can go through the feeling of being overlooked. But I've realized that the real measure of dedication and service comes not from outside acknowledgement, but from our commitment to the work itself, from our inner drive to keep going, even when it feels like no one notices. External recognition may be the driving force in the beginning, but in the end, it's the satisfaction of knowing you did your job, that you did what was right, that really matters. No matter where you are in life, no matter how lost you may feel or how overlooked you think you are, remember this: your efforts, no matter how big or small, have value. No effort is ever in vain. The quiet battles you're fighting, the unseen victories you achieve, one day, they will inspire others. I urge you, no matter your situation, to keep going, even when it feels like no one is watching. Don't let the silence around you make you feel like you're not enough or not worthy. Your perseverance has meaning in ways you can't always predict. And when you don't give up, when you continue to show up, you'll realize that some victories don't need public recognition, they only need you to keep going. If you're at a crossroads in your life, if you feel like you're lost or struggling to find your true purpose, I want you to know that every step you take, no matter how small, has value. Every moment you push through the silence is a step toward a future where you'll understand that the most important battles are often the ones no one sees. Please, don't stop. Even when the world doesn't give you credit, your work still matters. The truth is, the most significant work is done when no one is looking, and the quiet moments of dedication are often the ones that make the biggest difference. If my story has resonated with you, I invite you to share your story. Let those around you know that they are not the only ones fighting. Let them see that each of us has a personal victory that doesn't need to be acknowledged by the world to be important. Never stop dreaming. Never stop dedicating yourself. And never forget that your greatest victories are often the ones that happen in silence. If you feel that this story has inspired you, please leave a comment below and share your journey. Tell us about the quiet victories you've achieved, the moments when you fought through adversity and came out stronger, even when no one else saw it. Don't hesitate to share your story, you never know who it might inspire. If this message has helped you see your worth in ways you hadn't before, please like and share this video. Share it with others who may need a reminder that not every victory is loud. Not every success requires a trophy. But every effort counts. Let's build a community where every story matters, no matter how quiet. Together, we can support each other and keep going, even when the world doesn't see our efforts. Remember, victories don't always come with medals, but that doesn't make them any less meaningful. Once again, if you found this message helpful, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Let's continue to build a community where every story is celebrated, whether it's loud or quiet, seen or unseen. Keep walking your journey. Every step you take, every effort you make, will lead to something amazing, even if no one sees it immediately. Thank you for listening to my story. We'll meet again in the next video.